back. I hope you enjoyed the small group discussions. My name is Emilie Fox, and I am a Student Ethics Ambassador and graduate student here at UCCS. This afternoon, I have the privilege of moderating a panel on ethics as an individual advantage in the workspace. Following the panelists' comments to my questions, I will facilitate a short Q&A session from the audience. Please enter questions in the Q&A on the right of this session. We are pleased to have three panelists. Ethan Beute, Chief Evangelist at BombBomb Incorporation. Cheryl Radke, Colorado State Manager at Colorado Farm Bureau Insurance Company. And Ken Nufer, Chief Human Resources Officer at Pueblo Community College. Let's start with Ethan. Please share some ways you find ethics as a competitive advantage in your career. What benefits have you seen arise from ethical behavior decisions?
I'll go really simply and personally first, but then go into a much bigger concept. For me, it allows me to do work that I'm proud of in a way that I can be proud of, in a way, and pride isn't just a selfish thing. It's that I have the appreciation and respect of the people around me. It's just the right way to be. I mean, I think for all of you who saw that opening keynote with Corey, I would guess that the vast majority of you were like me and like the other folks on the panel we were talking before we went live here. And it's attractive, it's inspiring, it's motivating. You can inspire and motivate yourself by doing the right things consistently, and those habits beget other habits. But at a higher level, it's a massive differentiator. It's attractive to customers. And more importantly, it's attractive to employees. If you as a team of people can essentially operate from an ethical framework and an ethical perspective and do it very, very consistently, it's differentiating. And a great employee experience begets a great customer experience. And a great customer experience begets revenue and profitability. And that's not just happy talk. I just saw a recent piece of research from Forbes Insights and from Salesforce that established those causal linkages, that if employees feel great and they're treated great, customers feel great. And of course, if customers feel great, then revenue and profitability result. But it's also a piece published more than 20 years ago by three gentlemen at Harvard called the Service Profit Chain. And so this idea of making sure we're supporting our teams so that they're not in compromised positions, so that we're all modeling for one another ethical behavior, like that is the positive upward spiral that will produce fantastic results inside any organization. And everyone can be proud of the work that they're doing.
Thank you, Ethan. Now on to Cheryl.
Okay, good afternoon.
Hi, Cheryl.
Go ahead.
Please share some ways you personally find ethics as a competitive advantage in the workplace. What benefits have you seen arise from ethical behavior and decisions?
Okay, now I can say good afternoon. Well, my early career as an accountant, so that is my focus, was heavily centered around business ethics, obviously in the fiduciary and compliance area. And as I moved through management and upper management, it became more and more evident that business ethics around relationships was key. And those relationships that I built around honesty and trust and accountability and communications, fairness and respect, all those same ones that are the tenets for Daniels. I found that to be successful in business and in personal relationships, these traits are all very key. And they're certainly the biggest part of your own reputation and your company's reputation. And so I found an ethical approach to business, kind of like what Ethan was saying, can strengthen your competitive position, because the benefits are shown in the delivery of quality products in an honest and reliable way. It's essential to fixing processes and problems and improving those processes. It can enhance work life. So again, what Ethan talked about, by making the workplace fun, more challenging, no hidden agendas, people trust and respect each other, and companies deal with any unethical behavior when encountered, which improves relationships with customers and vendors and employees, and just instilling a more positive mindset that many times focuses or fosters creativity and innovation. For me, the personal payoff with a strong sense of ethics is you will exhibit a level of clarity and confidence that sets you apart in how you are seen by others. So it gives you that solid belief system that the keynote speaker also talked about earlier. And companies motivated by this strong sense of ethics, by making a positive difference for their employees, their customers and vendors, and also the communities that they live and work in, they benefit because they become known for this, and they have a competitive edge not only in their marketplace, but a big one is in the talent search arena, which can definitely create long-term value for the company.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. Now on to Ken. How do you personally find ethics as a competitive advantage in the workplace? What benefits have you seen arise from ethical behavior and decisions?
It's a great question. Let me first say I'm just honored to be in this panel and to be able to be here to present. So I think ethics really, when you look at ethics, there's good ethics and there's bad ethics. And I've been in private sector, I've been in the military, and I've been in higher ed for almost 28 years now. And in every place I've ever been, ethics have really been the difference between success and failure. Not for just me personally, but for everybody that I've witnessed. It's the difference between opportunity and stagnation. When you look at somebody who demonstrates ethical behavior, there's a lot more opportunity. And sometimes that opportunity comes because of the way you present yourself. If you're accountable and you're trustworthy and you are, a good person, you may get opportunities that other people won't get, even if they have more skill than you, even if they have more experience than you. So there's opportunity that comes from that. And for me, it's been true. My career has had a lot of strange paths on it, and it's always been because I built and grew, a great reputation, and that reputation is what has helped me to get where I am. But it also has really been important because it's built long-term lasting relationships. And I think that when you have relationships, you have mentors. And when you have mentors, you have, a constant stream of advice and people you can rely on. And those are the people that you turn to when you need them. And when you show integrity and you build trust like that, opportunities are provided that might not have otherwise come to you. If you demonstrate ethical behavior in all that you do, it leads to respect. And that provides an advantage when you're competing for a job, when you're competing for advancement. And I think you can be an expert. You can have all the skills, you can be an expert, but if you don't demonstrate ethical behavior, that success is going to be limited and minimized, I think. I think also when you hold yourself accountable, people look to see if you hold yourself accountable. Are you trustworthy? Are you doing what you say you'll do and doing it well? And are you willing to say I screwed up, I made a mistake, and I need to learn? So I think that it's really about respect, self-respect, respect for others. It's about showing that integrity and accountability to other people. And then you need to be, transparent. And I think when you do that and you build that, you really do, get to spread your wings. You get to have opportunities and options you would not have ever had before. So I think ethics is really a foundational piece for real success.
Thank you so much, Ken. Let's bring back both Ethan and Cheryl for these next couple questions. To start, Ethan, what experiences and values help you when faced with an ethical dilemma?
There are a few different ways I think about this. The first is that we need self-awareness and self-respect. And by that, I mean, we all have that feeling. I'm of the mind that most people are generally good, unless you're like super far gone. Like most people know what's right and kind of want to do what's right. And there are a variety of reasons they go wrong. And one of them is just that lack of self-awareness and self-respect to take that gut feeling that you have and to ponder it and honor it and think about why this feels a little bit wrong or feels a little bit off, or you're not quite sure about this situation or this person that you found yourself with or the situation you find yourself in. And so I think first it's being, for someone that's not really in touch with this practically day to day, I think it's important to be conscious and intentional about sensing and honoring those feelings initially. Another thing that I've gone to when my son was born, my wife and I have one child. He's now almost 18 and heading off to college. And so this is a long time ago. But, when we were pregnant, I was thinking about how am I going to help him out with some of this stuff? And I came up with, I needed a framework that would be easy enough to say to a 2-year-old and that could also still be good enough to grow into a useful framework as he grew as well. And I came up with honest, smart, and caring. And if you can turn down and find different characteristics and practices and activities underneath each of those. But I think if we can be honest, smart, and caring, which, by the way, if you look at the Daniels Fund values, I can tuck most of those into one of those 3. So in the beginning, it was just being familiar with the words, and then they became teaching lessons, and then they became conversations as he could think about the consequences of his own decisions or his thoughts or his words. And so I think, as simple as that is, it was useful for me to A, develop that framework, and B, to use it to teach him. And it made me think a lot differently about my own work. And then finally, just going back to where I was on the first question, when you think about it from an organizational standpoint, now I'm speaking particularly to the students who are with us, as you're evaluating potential employers, I think Corey's language earlier was very strong about just leave or don't do it. There are warning signs before you get in there. And of course, he told that great story of having that person confide in him, you want to get out of here. They're going to hate you. You're going to hate them. It's time to go. There are warning signs around that. I think if you're researching a company and you don't see clear values stated, or you don't see a clear mission stated that is something beyond product or beyond market dynamics in particular, or if you get into the interview and you have that opportunity to ask questions and you ask about these values and ask for stories or examples. Give me an example of when you've seen something like this. And if they don't have anything at hand, if they don't have anything at the ready about why the mission is meaningful to them personally, or examples of how these values are brought to life daily within the organization, those are kind of yellow flags to red flags, depending on the nature of the conversation. And I don't think it's too aggressive to ask about that. I think it's becoming more of an expectation that from employers that people will recognize and appreciate their values and mission. I think it's also fair and perfectly in reasonable accommodation that they should be able to provide these things to you as you're evaluating your options. And so there's just a few thoughts around that. And I hope there's something helpful in there.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. This next question will be directed at Cheryl. After you make an ethical decision in the workplace, how do you review or reflect on the event and learn from it?
Well, okay, as we know, decisions have consequences, and they can be positive or negative. And, if your decision was based on honesty and fairness and respect, transparency, although there can be some short-term negative impacts, perhaps, the long-term outlook will probably be positive if it was the right thing to do. But what I would just recommend, and what I try to do, is don't hide from the negative impacts. Self-reflection, that we talked about that. Some of the folks have talked about that. What could I have done better? What did I do? How could this have gone better? Could I have communicated better? Perhaps I wasn't fully transparent. What was the tone of the communication, as far as respect to the folks? Did I have enough information in the first place to make a good decision, to make a fair decision? Did I take the easy way out? Was I pressed for time? Was it a rush decision? So that's what I do when I'm faced with that, and that is how you learn. And you have to face those answers to your questions. May not always be what you hope that you would have done, but once you answer those honestly and face these, and then you learn from the outcome.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. This next question will be for Ken. How do you go about hiring ethical employees?
Wow, that's a tough question for sure, because there is no easy answer to that. Ethics is something that is demonstrated. It's something that is, shown, not necessarily that you can look at a resume or look at an application and necessarily find that. So, there's multiple steps to hiring, and each step there's a process to that. And I think really when you look at it, when you look at a resume and you start that first process, there are things that are highlights in there that you would notice. The kinds of things that they've done, the kinds of activities they're involved in. You want to look for those employees to see what their growth path looks like. How have they grown? Where have they gone? What have they done? But again, that resume is just the first step. There's no course or particular job that you can go and say, oh, obviously that's a highly ethical person. But that's a good start, understanding what they do and where they come. And I think Ethan really hit on it from the side of what's a potential employee looking for and the great questions they should be asking. As an employer, I look to see if they ask those kinds of questions. Are they interested in a mission? Are they interested in our values? Do their values match up with our values? I mean, that's a big question. And sometimes if you don't have your values clearly stated, how are they going to know? And sometimes it's not about ethics necessarily. Sometimes it's just about a bad fit because you have a different mission or different value set. But as you go through that hiring process, each step is about a two-way communication. It's about learning about us as we learn about you. And you want to make sure that as you get into the interview process, which is really, the place where we get the best opportunity to find out what kind of employee you're going to be. Scenario-based questions are really good to see how you think and how you apply certain things. Are you accountable? The other thing that is interesting, when you're interviewing and you get a question that you don't know the answer to, we really look to see if you're honest about that. If you don't know, it's okay to say, I haven't had that experience or I don't know that, but I'm certainly willing to learn it. I'm certainly willing to research it if you want me to. But when you get into that realm where people start to try to make it up, it becomes really obvious to the people who are interviewing. And that is really a red flag when you're hiring. You don't want to have that because that does speak directly to your ethics. How trustworthy are you? How honest are you? How are you going to work as an employee? And a lot of ethical behavior happens when nobody else is watching. And so, you want to really understand how they respond to different scenarios. Are they honest? And again, if you don't know an answer, it's okay to say, I don't know. I haven't had that experience. We haven't experienced everything. I haven't experienced everything. So, it's okay if you don't know. Do they take responsibility? Things we're going to ask about. Tell us about a time when, you've tried something and it failed. And what did you do? And how did you respond to that? Did you learn from it? Were you angry about it? How are you going to respond? So a lot of the hiring process is really about that communication. What are they asking us and how well are they responding to what we ask of them? And can we see, in that interview especially, the kinds of values and the kinds of expectations that we would be looking for to align to our values and to align to our mission. So I think I really appreciate Ethan's statements about that because it is two ways. And sometimes when people interview, they don't think it is. They just sit there and they want to just answer questions and you have no way to really judge that. And you want to have a good fit. You don't want to just work for an organization you don't fit with, but we also don't need employees who aren't going to fit with us either. And that's not a bad thing. That's not saying something negative about anybody. That's saying there's different fits out there and we should look for them and have those same value sets.
Thank you so much for that response. This next question will be directed at Ethan. How has the current pandemic affected your approach to ethics?
Sure. Before I jump on that, I want to add a layer to the previous question, which Ken did a fantastic job with. I would challenge leaders and managers to think about review, not just hiring ethical employees, but how do we make sure that employees don't wind up in bad situations? And so reviewing systems and processes that potentially put people in bad places to like do things they maybe wouldn't do, or even have to think about doing things that they're uncomfortable with. And so I think, the way that, like, and my point here is that good people are often in bad situations, and we behave sometimes in ways that are more consistent with the system or process or goal or structure that we're in. And there's something slightly potentially dehumanizing about that allows people to create some distance between who they are deep inside and what they're being asked or expected to do in the context of this. And so I think we need to be really aware of that as leaders and managers, as people who are designing systems and processes, setting goals for people and teams to achieve, to keep people in a space that they're comfortable, confident, and can operate really ethically from. So anyway, pandemic, virtues are timeless. Like when you look at the Daniels values, like they're timeless. You can go back to Aristotle's golden mean, for example. Like the pandemic hasn't really affected ethics, but the one thing I'll point to in particular is the way we've been forced to communicate during the pandemic. Obviously, there was a plan, at least I was part of a plan, to do all of this in person some point in the last calendar year when, before the pandemic shut it all down. There's something lost when we communicate in these channels. Video is the next best thing to being there in person, especially live video where we can go back and forth and people can chat in. And, it's a good approximation. But I will say that as we're doing this day to day in our businesses and even in our lives, our emotions, our intentions, our nonverbal communication, all of it is kind of dampened, muted, and sometimes even stripped in these digital channels. And when we're trying to read people and read situations, which we all do intuitively as fellow human beings and social creatures, our ability to do that in these channels is a little bit, is definitely reduced at some level, varying degrees depending on the channel, the quality of the internet connection, the quality of the camera, et cetera. And so we need to be really sensitive, especially in like one-on-one meetings with team members or in small group settings, to make sure that we're actively expressing ourselves clearly so that there's no confusion about our meaning or our intent or our motivation. In addition, we need to pay attention to other people as well and call it out. Like, hey, Sally, it seems like you might have a little bit of confusion or frustration around, where we just were there. Can you talk about that? Like, invite the conversation so that everyone can get on the same page, specifically around, again, definitely the meaning, but also the intent and the motivation behind the words and kind of what's going on. I think we need to be especially intentional and conscious about how we're communicating in these digital channels, because I think that's really key to responsible, good decision making and responsible, fair communication with one another.
Thank you so much, Ethan. So thank you to all the panelists for all those great discussion and answers. We are now heading into the Q&A session. So feel free to put your questions in the Q&A part. We already have a few questions that I can start asking the panelists. So this one's they kind of generally talk to all the speakers. So anybody feel free to chime in for this question. But it says, how do speakers feel about group activities outside of work as a mean to boost relationships and then ultimately ethics?
So the pandemic has definitely affected this.
I was going to say, do you want to go ahead, Ethan?
No, I'll just, I like it in general. The pandemic has obviously affected it. I think relationships in the context of our own business have certainly been challenged as a result. But in general, I like it. I do think it brings down walls that prevent people from being more honestly themselves and more honest with one another. When you get to know somebody and that intimacy, like that true familiarity, I think it breeds a lot of positive results in general. Carol.
I was just going to say, in all the companies that I've worked for, team building is a big thing, and you know, that's fine during the day and at lunch and whatever, but we've really tried to, in many of the organizations I've worked with, do some things in smaller group departments, those types of things, getting together, and just like Ethan said, that is definitely relationship building, and I think it goes a long way towards again, mentoring ethical behavior, you know, those, if you're around those type of folks, the modeling, I think is important also.
Yeah, I'm just going to chime in from the HR side of it, because obviously HR has a little bit different perspective in the world. And it's not negative, but it is, you know, it kind of goes back to something that Ethan said, and are we putting people in places that are uncomfortable? So, you know, if you're doing activities and they're outside of work, or they're at night or on a weekend or whatever, there are some parameters in which we need to be careful, because that needs to be done ethically as well. And if somebody is uncomfortable, you know, engaging in certain kinds of activities, or, you know, taking time away from their family to be out at night or whatever that may be, you know, we need to have honest, open communication about that, so that we understand what's going on, and are they comfortable or not comfortable in that, and, you know, ensuring that the activities are appropriate and managed well, because it is critical that we make sure communication is there. The ultimate goal, honestly, is so that people belong and they feel a sense of belonging and want to be there.
Thank you so much for all those responses. I will direct this next question at Ethan. Do you find that laziness or ease of shortcuts lead to unethical practices? How people park or where they leave shopping carts usually tied directly to their ethics or morals.
I love that. I haven't seen that research, but I would love to see that like a study around that. I like intuitively, I think we would accept that there's something there. And the key word that comes to mind in just hearing the way that's phrased, and especially with the shopping cart example, what comes to mind is selfishness. This idea that I'm operating almost exclusively for my own benefit, not the benefit of my team members, not the benefit of the organization, not the benefit of my customers. And so, yes, I think that's the case. I also think, as someone might draw or infer from some of my previous answers, again, I think sometimes it's driven by people with the wrong incentives, combined with weak foundation to make the right choices despite incentives that might encourage people to behave differently. I think goal setting, again, is something that is often done in a way that can almost, the context of it, and certainly the culture of it, if other people are behaving this way, can justify behavior that most of us wouldn't tolerate as a one-off act or in a cleaner context. And so there are a number of things that drive it. Ultimately, I think it comes down to selfishness in general, where you're more motivated by what's in it for you than for anyone else. And so there's several layers to it, and I don't think it's all individual. I think a lot of it can be organizational. So yeah, selfishness, laziness is another. Yeah, that's a fair word.
Thank you so much. I'm going to direct this next question at Cheryl. How does cultural background inform ethical relations with employees, clients, and customers?
Okay, how does cultural background inform ethical relations? I'm trying to think. I'm trying to get my head around what that means. How does it inform the ethical? How does cultural background? So in an organization, the cultural background, and how does that come across, I guess, in the ethical relationships with our employees and whatever. again, what I mentioned before is, and all of us have mentioned is, we have a saying in our company that, and it's a mantra and it's a mission statement and whatever, that we are here to do good things for other people. And so by doing that, we are very involved in the community by the activities that we do. We recognize employees quite a bit for their work and their accomplishments. I'm trying to think of, so in our, we do Zoom meetings for all employee meetings, and again, talk about what we're doing to be upfront and transparent in all of our dealings with new processes and policies that are coming out. So that is our culture that we have built, is that we are transparent, that we do communicate with our employees quite a bit. We are interested in doing surveys and seeing how they feel about various things. So if that's what someone was meaning about how your culture actually lets your employees know your ethical standards, I'm hoping that was what they were talking about.
It kind of sounded like it. Yeah, I think so. So thank you for that response. I'm going to direct this next question at Ken. Since I heard the word fair several times during the presentation by the panelists, from an ethical perspective, is there an actual difference between fairness and equitable practice?
Yeah, there is. I think equity and fairness are two different concepts that point to similar outcomes, but are different things. And I think we probably have all seen, there's 1.5 million different things out there that you can look at with the kids on the boxes trying to look over the fence at the ball game, and what's fair and what's equitable, and, who starts a race where and why. So I do think there's definitely a difference in those two. When you look at ethics, though, you typically think about fairness, because fairness is really about creating equitable and just relationships. But fairness requires you to look at each of those differently depending on circumstances and where we all are at that particular point. So you can talk about fairness in a very broad sense, but when you get down to equity, equity is driven by personal and individual circumstances. It's driven by a number of factors. So I don't think you can necessarily make those two the same. I do think fairness and equity is two different things, but equity in my mind is a piece of fairness.
Thank you so much. This next question I will have Ethan answer. Would you take a different approach to interviewing students for entry into a college program? I am a faculty member for a health program, and ethics are key in the medical profession. Are there key indicators I and other faculty should look for?
I'm going to redirect this one to Ken, who probably has just more context for it, I think.
Yeah, I'm happy to try to answer that. It's kind of it's a broad question, but ethics is universal. So I think starting there is the first part. Is it different circumstantially? I think, when you're looking for the red flags, or you're looking for the things that you want to look for when somebody's trying to enter into a program, and you're talking about, specifically when you're talking about a young student who maybe doesn't have a lot of world experience yet, they may not even have had an opportunity to, engage in some of the things that you would expect for, that you could judge for ethical behavior. But there's a lot of red flags, right? If you're interviewing a student for a program, and at one point in my career, I actually worked for a nursing program, was part of these processes. And so, you want to see, are they really selfish people? Do they show the compassion that you're looking for, that you would expect, that aligns with what your program is for? Are they trying to overwhelm you with their behavior? Are they giving you honest answers? Are they willing to say, I don't know how to answer that question? So I think there are some pieces to that you want to look at. But I think ethics is really universal. So it really is circumstantial as to what they may or may not know or have had a part of. But you can still tell by the way people act, right? Behavior and communication is, universal as well. And everybody knows when somebody's acting badly. Most people can go, that's kind of a bad actor. So I think that would be the way I would respond to that.
Thank you so much. And Ken, this question is actually directed for you as well. So I am a retired Army, and I would like to know how you feel about the Army setup in relations to proper ethics.
Well, I was Navy, so first I'm going to have to, to put that aside. I'm not sure I fully understand the question. Is there any way we could get clarification on that? I'm not sure I understand what we're asking there, and maybe somebody else has some input to that too. But
I don't have any.
Yeah.
The follow-up is how the Army treats people.
Well, again, I wasn't in the Army. I was in the Navy, so I don't have a lot of experience with the Army. I can go by what I know from the Navy. I do think that there is and has been certainly behaviors that occur that are not always nice and can put you in places that you don't want to be. But I also think when you're talking about a military operation, there are certain things that just have to happen, and you do have to be able to respond and take orders and be ready to do what you're told to do. And you do have to have a pretty, when you're in close contact and combat and those kinds of things, you have to have a pretty good sense that everybody's going to be in the same place at the same time and have your back. So I do think there's reasons for it, but I also think that, there is a kinder, gentler way to approach some things for sure. I remember in my boot camp experience, having to stand on a sidewalk with all of my stuff on, all of my jackets, and it was in Florida, and it was like 99 degrees and 100% humidity, and I had to hold a pencil out in front of me for like as long as I could, and I think there's a point where some of that becomes a little bit too much. Hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you so much. Yeah. I'm going to have Ethan take this next question. What advice would you give students who want to better their ethical character?
First of all, I think attending something like this, getting ideas and inspiration, thinking about what resonates with you, I actually think it's a worthwhile exercise. Again, I did it for my newborn son, and it was very simple. And I've done this in other ways as well, but I think if you're really serious about this for yourself, I think spending time in reflection and trying to organize your own mission statement and maybe your own set of values and just document those. And they're living. It's not in stone. It can evolve. You're going to grow and change and learn, and you're going to take these ideas and put them up against real circumstances, and you're going to get new information. You're going to be inspired by other people. So it's treated as a living document. But I think if you spend the time, the point isn't to have them written down on paper or typed into a Google Doc or something. The point is to spend time in reflection on these things. What makes you feel good? What has made you feel bad in the past? Like golden rule, platinum rule type thinking, and just taking the time to organize that stuff. A, it's just healthy. B, it's something now that you can reflect against instead of like going from scratch every time. And then C, just going back to where Ken was on, are you a good fit with this organization? Is this organization a good fit for you? You have a better sense of who you are, what you're about in a meaningful way, not just what kind of job you want to get or what kind of field you want to be in, but like, who am I at my core? What do I care about a lot? What does a great version of me look like? How can I be of benefit and value to other people, perhaps outside the immediate bounds of my working situation? And I think if you have that, then that makes these other exercises of matchmaking in an employment standpoint much easier. And I think your ability to speak to them as well and some of the thoughts that you've gone through, I guarantee that is going to be attractive to an employer if you can articulate kind of the evolution of your thought process about what life is, what it means, how you operate, what's important to you, what your litmus tests are for yourself and your decision making. Like, just the idea alone that you're thinking that way and can speak to it extemporaneously in an interview environment is attractive. I promise.
Yeah, if I could just quickly add to that too, I think the other piece to that is you find the people that you want to role model after and the mentors that you want to follow, and get into their head and get into their life, figure out what they are, because we all have people we look up to and we go, man, I wish I could be like that person, right? So I think when you're building character, that's a great way to do it, is to find those people who have that character that you like and that fit with you, and tap into them.
And interestingly, the most awesome people are the kinds of people that will say yes if you ask for a half hour of their time. Like the people that, like, it's interesting the way that works. The selfish people that don't have as much to offer here are the ones that are like, nah, I don't have time for that.
Right.
And then just surround yourself with those people and find organizations that really value ethics. Service organizations, whatever, nonprofits, whatever is of interest to you. But like minds and mentoring and modeling. Yep.
Great answers all the way around. Thank you all. I think I'm going to direct this next question at Ken. Ethical codes take a substantial amount of time to develop and are shaped by experiences and events during a person's life. Do you think we need to start instilling ethical values sooner than at the collegiate level? Would society benefit from teaching ethical approaches at the middle school or high school levels?
Yes. I don't think, by the time we're at the collegiate level, a lot of that's already been formed and instilled in us, right? I think that ethics is being taught all the time for everybody everywhere. I think it's a constant evolution. I think people are constantly being hit one way or another on ethics, whether it's formal or informal is the question. I think that instilling it sooner and building it sooner is great. I think that's why a lot of times athletics and clubs and those kinds of things are really important, because that's where a lot of people start to develop and build a really strong ethical core. But I think, I don't think that if you wait until the collegiate level, that's going to happen. But I think it's happening all the time. The question is really, should it be formal or informal?
Thank you so much. Cheryl, I'm going to have you answer this next question. And anybody else could chime in too with this one. It seems like a everyone question. If you could have done anything differently during your young adult years regarding ethics, what would you have done differently?
Well, I think my ethical background started in my family life with my dad, and he was just he was a role model for me. When we talk about role model, community leader, family first, very modest. He practiced kind of what the speaker said today about living within your means, and really teaching us, all of his 4 girls, that. He turned down a number of promotional opportunities because of his family and the 4 children. And so my mother would always say, well, we could have been in this city or whatever, but your dad turned down that promotional opportunity because we were set in this small community and we were all very entrenched and ingrained, and he wanted that for us. So would I change much? And then, being in athletics, perfect. I can't remember if it was Ken or Ethan talking about athletics, being ethical. Learned a lot about that, and unselfishness and teamwork and treating people right, sportsmanship, those types of things. So I don't want to say that I was just perfect and grew up in a perfect part. It's funny. You say, well, was I lucky? And then I liked what the speaker said too. But everybody is here that can make your own choices. Life is your choice. And I think with the modeling that I received from probably my family and teachers, whatever, I ended up making good choices and taking myself out of many situations where I knew was wrong. And, again, yes, I made mistakes. Yes, I did some things wrong. But anyway, that's kind of my personal story.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, I think it's important to be aware that we do make mistakes and then that we can learn from them and grow from them. So I think it's important that you make those notes too. So thank you so much. Unfortunately, it looks like we are about out of time for our panelists and event today. So thank you all for sharing your experiences with us and answering all these wonderful questions. And this concludes our first day of the Ethics Summit. We learned about the advantage that founders consider on ethics as a competitive advantage. And as a reminder, we will begin tomorrow at 9 a.m. to explore ethics as a competitive advantage for organizations. We hope to see you then and have a great rest of your day.